Mhm.
Hi everyone, welcome. Happy Wednesday. We will be starting our city charter review meeting at the moment. So just to begin, many of you have an agenda in front of you, so we'll start with attendance. Judith Garcia, present. Leo Robinson.
Here.
Calvin Brown.
Here.
Melinda Vega Maldonado. Todd Taylor.
No.
Back on vacation.
Perfect, thank you. Rosemary Carsley. Present.
Carlisle.
Yesenia Alfaro.
I'm not speaking for her, but
Yesenia Alfaro. Henry Wilson. Alex Barcel.
Present.
Mary Burke. Jason Stalker.
Present.
Charlene McLean.
present.
Miriam Racantor.
Present.
Great. Thank you, everyone. That was attendance. And now we are moving over. Now, our next section is a quick review of purpose and process. A quick review. I want to just let everyone know that the purpose of this meeting is to discuss and review the city charter, and for the members of this committee to present their suggestions, comments of changes that we'd like to see set for each section. The process of that, currently what we're doing is we're reviewing section by section, having a discussion. Every member has the opportunity to present their suggestions, comments that they want to see changed. We will compile all of this in a whole document that we will later on, after we discuss and review the entire charter as a whole, we will compile the documents that we've set with different recommendations and suggestions, and we will later on take a vote on it at the very end once we have holistically reviewed and discussed the charter. So I will have more of that information and that process in place in writing to present to everyone, hopefully in the next 2 weeks. That being said, that covers the quick review of purpose and the process that we will continue to review the city charter. Now we move on to any lingering questions, comments from previous sections. I know I have received communications from Mary Burke and communications from Jason Stalker, but before we move on, I see someone has a question. Charlene, do you have a question?
Yes, I have some questions pertaining to section 2, although I'm wondering, is Cheryl Watson on the line?
No.
Cheryl Watson is actually on vacation today, but if you have a specific question for Cheryl, what we can do is we can take it down and have her answer it.
Okay, because actually the questions that I have were in the notes I emailed to you just before the last meeting.
Okay.
But it's first, I mean, they're all in section 2. The first question, 2.5C, which is the rules of procedure, states the council shall from time to time adopt rules for its proceedings. My question is, where are these rules recorded and are they accessible?
Yeah, so we can definitely answer that question. We have a set of rules that the council abides by.
Wilson
I believe it's 10
has
rules
joined the
or
meeting.
14 rules.
So 25 rules.
25 rules. It's basically to set the decorum of how the council functions, and those are available. They should be available on the website, and we also have copies of that.
Okay.
If it would be helpful for the review of this committee, we can make sure to have copies of that for all of you to see what those rules are.
I don't know that it's necessary for our review because they're the council's rules. I just wondered, since they are mentioned in the charter, just is it something that is available to the public? And you have answered that satisfactorily. Next question, section 2.7B as in boy, emergency measures. Are when the council votes on emergency measures, are they required to have a time limitation? If so, why isn't there language stating that? Or my guess is that it's probably covered by state legislation. But again, I'm just curious, emergency measures, are they open-ended or are you required to pass it with a time limit?
Great. So when you ask, is it required to have a time limit? Do you mean a time limit within the vote when the vote is taken?
Well, yeah, with the measure that
You're
you're
muted.
passing by a certain time, are you required to state that it is in force for a very, or is it open-ended without?
Okay, Shading, you're cutting off a bit on our end. Is she cutting off?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you're cutting off. Yeah, you're cutting off a bit, so we only got a portion of that. So what I can
Okay.
do is, for the record, what I'll do is, for the record, make sure that Cheryl has a written response to this, to specifically that question as well. And then we'll discuss it in our next meeting and make sure that every member here has an answer, a written answer to that.
Thank you.
Of course. Okay, so I know that for going back to any lingering questions, comments from previous section, I know Jason submitted a communication along with Mary Burke. So Mary, do you want to go first? You're on mute.
I will never get used to the mute, not mute thing. Jason can certainly go first. I'm fine with that.
Okay, Jason, you have the floor.
Thank you. I guess 3 comments. My first general comment isn't really related to 2, but it's a general concept comment. If we can have included in this charter a TOC so that people can go to the sections they need to, it doesn't look like there's a TOC at all. And
What's a TLC?
Table of contents.
Okay, perfect.
And so that would be a helpful reference for people actually reading it.
Okay, so do you mean, and just for clarification and to be on the record, you want the table of contents to be present on the city charter, the document itself?
Yeah, there should be one in there. I'm surprised there isn't one. But
Perfect.
yeah.
I love that. I think it's a great idea. Great. Continue.
In section 2.7D, dog, I think we should add in some language that references to items are also posted via the internet or some sort of online portal, and not specifically note that things are going to a newspaper. We can have both. I think we can say on the internet and in the newspaper, but just limiting to a newspaper, I think we're cutting out a large portion of people from getting information that is relevant to them.
Yeah.
And then in section 2.11, where we just start to talk about having a city manager, I think a cross-reference to say that more information on their duties can be found in section 4 or something along those lines, so that people don't think something is missing here when we're introducing that person. We can tell them that there's more information over here. And I think those cross-references are helpful when you're reading through a document trying to understand who people are.
Love that. Perfect. Okay, great. So these are your 2 comments for section 2.7, 2.11, and the table of comments.
Yes.
contents. Awesome. Thank you. That's very helpful. And then I know that the other comments that we had, lingering comments that we have for section 2.1 and 2.2 is Mary. So Mary, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I submitted commentary on basically some of the conversation that we had at the last meeting, which was June 4th. And as you'll see in what I wrote, that in section 2.1, at our last meeting, members of the Charter Review Commission suggested that 2-1 of the city charter be changed moving forward by reducing the number of elected city officials. The first was to reduce to 9 members from 11, and the second proposal was to reduce to 7 members from 11. I want to go on being against that, the following 2 reasons. The first are the following reasons. The first is we have a representative democracy structure, even at the local level. By reducing the number of city council members, we would, as a result, be centralizing the decision-making power for the city into fewer representatives of the people, thereby creating a structure where more power and authority is housed in fewer elected officials of the city council. Keeping the charter at 11 council seats means the representative government structure is closer to the people. I also like the fact that, especially on important decisions that impact all of us, it takes more city councilors to say yes or to say no to get to a majority vote. I feel it protects the constituents and ensures more frequently than not that decisions are being made in the best interest of all who live in Chelsea. Ultimately, fewer council seats means fewer votes are needed on an issue to get to a majority. I respectfully disagree with the rationale that we always worked with 9 members. We have not had 9 members on the city council since before 1994, and the diverse representation of our 11-member city council since 1994 has served us well. Chelsea since 1994 has gone through a renaissance and revitalization to the extent that the current rainy day fund was able to be built up over the years and is seeing our city and neighbors through the unbelievable impact of the global pandemic. More elected officials in the legislative body ensures more eyes and ears on the decisions that are ultimately made by the city council on behalf of constituents and ultimately impact all of us. Finally, the issue of lower voter turnout in some districts is not a reason to revise governance structure. Rather, it is, however, a reason for the city and the city officials in all districts to take on a campaign of increasing civic engagement, civic education, and voter registration. Reducing the city council will not help with the true root cause of low voter turnout. Rather, our city leaders must do their part in reaching out and engaging constituents from all districts. And that's section 2.1.
Thank you, Mary. I appreciate your comments for that section. Does anyone else have any comments, any lingering comments about past sections? I see a hand up. Who is it? Mimi. Yes, Mimi, you have the floor.
Thank you. I sent some comments about section 2.9. I would like to see that council people or person or whatever, if they were indicted instead of convicted, I would want them to leave the council, leave of absence or whatever. But I think if you're indicted on a crime for either state or federal, it's a distraction, and the council should not be able to hold a seat in the council. It takes a long time to go through the courts, and I think just saying that they're convicted of a crime is not enough. I would like to say if they're indicted for a crime.
Okay, you would like to say indicted of a crime,
Yeah.
and you said that you sent those for the record for section
2.9.
Section 2.9. Okay, I have Charlene. Charlene, you have the floor, and then Jason.
I honestly don't think that would be legal. I am not a lawyer, make that very clear. However, an indictment is not a conviction. And in the absence of a trial or a finding of guilt, I don't believe, and this is a question for Cheryl,
Okay. Great, thank you, Charlene. You're breaking up a bit, just letting you know. But we did hear, and just to repeat for the record, for folks who are watching, you do not agree, and we're setting this aside for Cheryl and her consultation. You do not believe that an indictment is something that we can really target specifically because it might be unconstitutional. But this is a question that is to be set aside for Cheryl. So Mimi, thank you for that. I appreciate your comment, but again, we're going to move that over as a question to Cheryl. So we're going to add that to the pile of questions that Charlene has also submitted.
There is language, if anybody has a felony or anything, they're not allowed to run. And in the past, there was a situation where that happened up in the Prattville area, where somebody was convicted of a crime.
So someone was convicted of a crime.
Yeah, and then eventually beat what was actually, what it was charged for. Yeah.
Okay, so the case got dismissed. Okay, Jason, do you have I saw your hand, Jason, and then I see Councilor Brown. So Jason, I'll give you the floor because I saw you first.
Yeah, I just think in short, I'm just against it. It doesn't make any sense. It goes against innocent until proven guilty. Just because they've been indicted doesn't mean that they actually committed something.
Okay, so you would leave it as is?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else you would like to add, Jason? No? Okay, Councilor Brown?
Yeah, I agree with the two following speakers. I just think, you just can't accent someone to be removed from a board, whether it's appointed or elected, just because they've been accused of something. We've seen too many times that folks have been accused of things in reality, and in the end of the day, the end of the trial, have been vindicted and not been have been found guilty. And I just think, we should continue to let the courts run the courts and due process become due process, which is part of our Constitution, right? And I think there is, as Councilor Robertson stated, there is some language that strictly say if you are a convicted felon or have been a convicted felon, you cannot serve an elected position or an appointed. And to go even further, even before you run for such office, you have to take a Corey review check, just to make sure that you're not a convicted felon. If you've had a misdemeanor, that's something else. I mean, you can have a misdemeanor that can lead into a smaller charge against you, and you can run. It specifically states a felony conviction, and I think that's hard enough. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councilor Brown. Anyone else have any pending comments regarding section 2 or anything that was mentioned? Anyone? Okay, so then that moves us to the public speaking portion. Do we have any public speakers? I believe not. So that section of the meeting is closed, and now we officially move on to the review of section 3. So for the review of section 3, I have received 3 communications from 3 different folks who have submitted comments. I have Mimi. I know you submitted comments as well, so Mimi, I will let you go first. Everyone should have a copy of Mimi's comments. Mimi, I will let you start reading section 3-1.
Me? No, I'm surprised. My comments were all about section 2. I don't remember. I want to know why we can't have a member of this, teacher or someone who is not an administrator on the board, but I don't.
Yeah, that's actually section 3. So
Yeah.
just for the record, Mimi, I have it in front of me. Your question was, can we appoint a non-voted member onto the committee, also known as a teacher?
Okay.
So that's your request.
Yep.
And then that's what I have from you. And then I also have comments for section 3-4, where you ask to change part of this to say approved by the city council during budget hearing. So I'm trying to understand what you mean by these.
I don't remember sending these. Well, I would just assume that if I had said that the school committee shall vote to establish an annual salary for its members, I don't understand why they establish it and not someone else. Why it's not part of the budget process.
Okay. Okay, great. So those were your comments for section 3.
Could she make that a little clearer? What does she mean
Can I,
by
Yeah,
that?
yeah.
can I ask for a point of clarification? Because
course.
my comment goes a little off of Mimi's too. Can we have some can anyone share background on the school committee? Like, where does their budget come from? How are they, who gives it to them to spend? And what are they allowed to spend it on? And does their salary actually come from the city council, or is it given to them by another entity? Because that information is in here, and so some background is helpful so that these
Okay.
comments can be more clear.
Can make sense. Okay, great. And you know, we're very fortunate that one of our committee members is Mary Burke, who is the superintendent of schools. So I think that if Mary gives that context, that will allow us to understand a little bit better some of the questions that have been submitted. So Mary, the floor is yours to answer Jason's questions and Mimi's questions.
Sure. Okay, I have to give you a little bit of history in order to understand. Prior to 1993, across Massachusetts, for a number of years, school districts were not doing a very good job by our children and by our students. And so it took a great deal on the behalf of the Commonwealth to actually change the law, and it was a huge change. It was called the 1993 Education Reform Law. What it did was it separated, for the most part, school departments from the city council in many ways. It's not you're not as closely aligned anymore. You're separated so that school departments can focus on school and not so much. In the olden days, it was like there was a lot of politics in school departments, right? School departments, school committees, etc. 1993, part of it was the promise of they're going to give us increased funding at that point, which dwindled over the years due to inflation, but that's another story that came to SOA last year. But increased funding, but in return, it would be increased accountability on the schools. And the increase of the accountability came through the commissioner's office. And so the commissioner of education deemed that there would be a standard curriculum. No longer could individual districts choose their own curriculum. It came from the state, known as the Massachusetts frameworks. And there was going to be annual testing. The annual testing, as we all know, is the MCAS. And then we would be held accountable for increasing those test scores year over year in order to continue to get the increased funding from the state, which was called Chapter 70. So, Jason, in answer to your question, a significant proportion of our funding comes from the state, roughly anywhere, depending upon the year, 75 to 80%. Most part of the district, the funding is based, 70 is based off of the real estate taxes. Chelsea is a poor district, so the state backfills it so that there's consistent funding for all of us throughout the state. I'm going to shift a little bit, and then I'm going to ask you to ask me clarifying questions if I haven't been clear. But before I do that, 2 places I just want to answer. In answer to the amount of money that school committee members receive, I'm going to probably defer to Leo and Calvin, but I'm pretty sure the last time it was raised was during my tenure, and I believe it had to be approved by the city council. It comes into a vote. The school department budget is prepared by the superintendent annually, and the superintendent going out and eliciting support and needs from the constituents, from the stakeholders, the parents, the students, the school committee. The superintendent will present at a public hearing in March, and by the end of March, the vote goes to the school committee whether or not to vote for the budget as the plan is presented. And then about 60 days later, I think, it goes to the city council for the school committee, the school superintendent to present to the city council, and then the the city council at that point has to vote to endorse the budget. So the budget goes through multiple iterations, multiple approval processes, but ultimately the city council approves the budget, you know, and it is a plan, and they get a very detailed booklet in terms of where the line items go, how much for salaries, how much for facilities, how much for repairs and capital improvements, etc. It's a full course when you're getting your administration degree. So I've just done 15 weeks in about 10 minutes. And so I know I haven't done a great job. And then why we can't have a teacher on, a non-voting member, a teacher on the school committee. We have a non-voting member already. We have two. We have a student and we have a city council member. I believe this year it is Leo Robinson. However, it would be difficult, hold on. It would be difficult to have a teacher because they are a member of the teachers union. If we did that, then we would have to go for equity, and equity would mean that we would have to have the following unions. Our administrative union, our administrators are in a union, our paras, our clerk, our nurses, our custodians, our nurses. So we would have to have for equity a non-voting member across the board. And so it doesn't really serve an efficient purpose in a governance structure, but that's what the public comment section is. And there is also too a piece where you hold your superintendent responsible and accountable for holding meetings throughout a year, you know, making sure that having conversations with faculty meetings or focus groups and things on that nature. So there are other ways to get that non-voting lens. It doesn't have to be at that meeting. Okay, questions?
Does anyone have questions? Jason?
So then when it comes to the salaries for the school committee members, is that salary in the March packet, or is that salary in a separate approval item? So one's for the kids, we'll call it for the kids in the schools. That's one budget, right? And it's going to be $100,000, 80,000 is coming from the state. The city council agrees to pay the other 20,000. And then there's another budget if the school committee decided to increase their budget from $10,000 to $15,000. Is that correct?
The school committee salary is in the school committee budget. The school committee cannot go for a pay increase. It would have to be initiated by the city council. Anytime that the city council would go for a pay increase, they would also include the school committee in that vein. And actually, just for the record, the city council over the past few years have gone above and beyond what our contribution to the school department has been. And I don't know if people realize the school committee budget is larger than the city council budget. The city overall budget. Mary, you gotta unmute yourself.
So Mary, you're on mute. And so I'll give Mary the floor. I see Jason, I see Charlene. I'll let Charlene and then Jason, but Mary, go first.
So I will say, rightfully so, the school department budget should be larger than the city budget. Keep in mind, we are the elephant in the room. We are the largest employer in the district. When you include part-time employees as well as full-time employees, we employ 1,200 people, and the majority are residents. We make sure we prioritize residents. So so that's a big piece of it. And yes, you know, our city council, the last 5 years has gone above net school spending by anywhere from 4 to 5% every single year. And that has been huge because when I first started at City Hall, both as a deputy superintendent and then the first couple of years as a superintendent, we were always at 95% net school spending. In the last 4 years, our city council has believed in the work of the school department to the point where they have funded us at 104 to 105%.
Great, thank you, Mary. I'll go to Charlene and then Jason.
Just to Leo's point about the school committee compensation, it does say section 3.4 that it begins, the school committee shall by vote establish an annual salary for its members. So that boldly says the school committee is establishing its own compensation. And I get, just the question is, is that by legislative statute at the state level? Or, I'm wondering by what authority is the committee, the school committee, allowed to establish its own compensation? I am
Mary, I'll
sure.
give you the floor.
Yes, thank you. I'm finished.
So there's a difference between establishing and then getting it voted to approval. I can establish that, every school or, if I was a school committee member, I could be 100,000, you're going to give me 100,000, but it's not going to be by city council, right? So it has to be approved by the city council.
Okay. Charlene, does that answer your question? You can go ahead and
It does. I would just, I'm going to go back and I'll suggest language. I just think that needs to be made a little more clear here. That's maybe even just adding, subject to a vote of approval by the city council. We'll submit later in time for next meeting.
Okay, yes,
Thank
that
you.
would be helpful. Thank you. That's a great point. I'm so glad you asked that. If you can submit that by writing, I think that will be very helpful for several of the members here who had questions. Councilor Brown, I saw you, but I saw Jason first. If Jason, you can hear us, I'll let you go first and then I'll let Councilor Brown. Jason? Okay, Councilor Brown, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I just wanted to interject with the budget regarding the school committee. The city council, obviously, we sit back, we listen to them, we give them leeways, we respect what they're doing. So, I mean, a lot of times when we're sitting here and we determine what our salary should be, we have no imagination what we think the what the school committee salary should be, other than going out and getting samples around the communities that's closer to ours. But the short answer is we always have, since I've been on the council, we always have taken the lead of allowing them to come to us with some figures. And at the end of the day, we feel that those are figures that we can support and we vote in favor of it. But they do, I believe they do have some early stating as far as suggesting that, if the city council is having a raise, we should be considered also. And when that language come up, we also consider, what some of the numbers that we can give you when we look at our budget. So that's where that language comes, that they establish their communication, but they don't officially establish the figure that is voted on by the city council. And they're usually done together also, the city council and the school committee at the same time.
Great, thank you, Councilor Brown. Any other
Just to add to Councilor Brown, in the past, anytime that the city council was looking for a pay raise, they would do a survey of what all the other communities were making and whether or not Chelsea should be brought up to that level. And so far, we've never have been. And anytime that they looked at an increase, they always included the school committee as being part of that. So the school committee is not on an island by itself. So when the council moves for an increase, they also help the school committee look at an increase.
Great, thank you.
Judy, could I just do one final comment? I also want people to understand that our school committee and city council are underpaid compared to other communities and districts. And I believe they've only once in the past 15 years actually gone for an increase. So I think that, I'm really, in awe of the hours that you guys put in, that the school committee puts in to help us, as a successful district. So.
Thank you, Mary. Now I want to move on. I know Jason's on the line. Can Jason hear us? Is Jason gone? Okay, so we'll go back to Jason. I know he submitted comments, so let me now move on to Mary. I know you also submitted comments. Once Jason gets back on, we'll review his comments. But Mary, I'll give you the floor. I know you had comments on section 3.1.
Mhm. And it's very quick. My comments on 3.1 are very similar to my comments on 2.1. I believe that the charter should stay as written. I don't believe that we should be reducing any numbers of the seats of the school committee. I believe that we need to keep the governance structure as it is.
Great. Do we have any comments, replies, suggestions, feelings? Everyone's good? Okay, so Jason, is he on? No, he's not. So I feel compelled for the record to read Jason's submission of comments. So I will do so, and hopefully he joins us so he can explain more. So let's start off with 3-1. His comment is, if we reduce the council members, I assume we need to consider reducing school committee to match city council. Next comment, 3.1, cross-reference to section 2-2, where we state that the city councilor sits on the school committee as a non-voting member. So I guess here he wants to highlight that we have a non-voting city councilor member on the school committee.
That's already happening.
Okay, so that is already happening. So we will see, you know, I'm just reading this for the record. If he joins us, he can go ahead and explain more. So now, section 3-4 and section 2-1, his comments are compensation to city council and school committee. We should consider adding language that limits compensation to available appropriations, like we do for compensation to city manager in section 4-4. Jason, have you joined us? Jason, if you can hear us, remove yourself from mute.
I'm here.
Hi, Jason, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I know you were off for a bit, but I started reading your comments. For
Okay.
the record, I wanted the public to know. So I'll give you the floor now so you can pick up on your comments. Actually on section 3-4, where you ask regarding where does the school committee get its budget from? So I'll let you read your comments and explain them and just give us an overview of why you submitted them.
Oh, so I guess I don't need that. I guess we've answered that question on where the school committee budget comes from.
Do you want to cover the rest? Because I was reading the rest for you.
Sure. I guess I'll just start. So a general comment, right? If we reduce the number of council members, we just need to be consistent because about whether we're reducing the number of committee members for the school committee or not to match them. Also in 3.1, it might be helpful to have a cross-reference to section 2.2 where we state that the makeup of the school committee also has a city councilor that's non-voting that sits on it. As it reads, that doesn't, if you didn't read the previous section, you would know that section. So the cross-reference I think is helpful. And then 3.4 and 2.1, when we talk about compensation to the school committee and to city council, it was interesting. I had already read section 4, and when we talk about the city manager, when we approve their salary, we say that it can't exceed appropriations. So it was interesting that we say that we can't. We set a limit to determine how much that person is able to get paid, but we don't say that for the other people, for the elected officials, city council and school committee. So suggesting that we add some language in there that set parameters for what that can be. Whether that means an increase can't be greater than 10% year over year or something like that. Yeah, that's it.
Great, thank you, Jason. Anyone have any comments?
Yeah, just to respond to that, the present city council if they were looking for a pay raise, they would have had to do that 18 months in advance, so that a new city council would be the people who would benefit by any increase. The present council would.
I'm aware of that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think, Jason, so I think what Jason's saying is that we should state this technicality on our charter. So we should be very clear that if we're setting parameters for our city manager, then we should set parameters for a city council or an elected official member for the future. I don't think you're really discussing how we do things now. I think what you're trying to establish is a clear written statement for the future, a roadmap for the future.
Yeah, and it's just, yeah, I understand there's 18 months and you're not voting on your own salary and you're voting on the future people who you could be in that bucket, so you could still benefit from it. But it's just an understanding of it's interesting when you have the opportunity to potentially vote on your own salary. I think putting in some parameters so that you can't go crazy is helpful. And I think it allows the constituents to feel like there are some mechanisms in place for checks and balances. The city manager can't approve their own salary, so they, work at the mercy. So I just, whereas if you're voting on your own, you can do whatever you want. It could be doubled from $15,000 to $30,000, and it just doesn't sit right. That's all. Some checks and balances.
Thank you, Jason. I see Councilor Brown.
Thanks. Just because we have what we have called here is a form of government. So with the city council and the city manager's salary, they're quite opposite. I mean, the city manager is hired as a potential CEO to run a corporation, city of Chelsea. The city council members and the school committee members are elected about from the voters of the voters list in the city of Chelsea. So what we did, what happened with this year was we tried to take a lot of the politics out of what happened prior to 1993 and the receivership years, where this charter actually came into fruition around 1994. So by having to bring in a city manager and have to be able to give him a contract or her a contract for 3 or 5 years, and then have to be able to vote for your own salary, which is something that we have done, I believe, twice or once since I've been there, maybe twice. It's something that is tribute to the city council. The charter gives us that language. The charter gives us that because it's fair. The city board leaders prior to this charter, they believe that. And I think that's still something that if it's a little unclear, we can make it clearer. But I think that's the way that we keep a check and balance amongst ourselves as elected officials, and also as a CEO coming into trying to be our head for whatever the extended of the contract is.
Okay, Mary.
I just want to echo what Calvin said, because he did an excellent job of explaining it. I think if I'm not mistaken, it's what I'm hearing is just wanting some type of checks and balance system in the charter language. Can you still hear me? I'm sorry, it looks like my internet is okay. And at the same time, I don't think it's really necessary, because the city council itself is the legislative body that will be the checks and balance. And who's the checks and balance on that legislative elected body are the voters. And that's why I go back to my original comments when we started. That's why it's better to have a few more than a few less, because you want to be able to have more voices in this. And I think that's where we can feel secure that the fact that our city council over the last 40 to 50 years and our school committee have not given themselves huge raises constantly and everything else is an indication that there is already an internal checks and balance system to all of this.
Great. Anyone else want to respond?
Yeah, just to add to Jason's rationale, if I'm correct, by putting in something in regards to the city councils, they would be receiving a raise every year, which the last time the city council got any type of raise goes back maybe 10 years ago.
No, no, that wasn't my, no, that's not my intent. My intent was not to say that explicit timeframes, but to either put the same phrasing that it says for the city manager within the appropriations, or if we need to get more, opening up the general conversation, do we need to be more granular and say that any increase cannot be greater than 10% of the existing salary, something like that, to allow for those section balances. And this isn't coming from a place of, I'm not coming down on this city council or a previous city council. I'm forward thinking on what if the wrong, we all vote, but what if the wrong people get there? What if something happens that people start voting to give increases to this council, and you've now created something greater, right? That wasn't intended. So if the charter can help control that at a rate, then I think that's smart. But it's not, my comment isn't a reflection on the existing council. And I just want to be clear on that.
Thank you, Jason. Any Alex?
Would it be like trying to match inflation rates there, Jason? I just want clarification.
I couldn't understand what you said. I'm sorry.
Are you trying to say like trying to match like inflation rates, like the raises or what?
You can take a new
All right.
guys.
You can hear me, Jason?
Hi.
All right.
Yeah.
So are you trying to say like try to match like the inflation rate, like their raises, or what in regards to?
No, it doesn't. The number can be if we put a number in there, we can determine what that is. It doesn't. If you go to inflation, right, then you're really tying it to like at some regimented rate there will be a raise. That's not what I'm trying to get at. I'm not trying to I'm not trying to build in raises just to build it in as a safeguard. I'm just saying, if if the city council proposes a raise for themselves and the school committee, these are the parameters at which they can do it, right? Whether they can't be more than what the budget allows, it can't be more than X percentage of the existing rate, or you could say to that year's inflation rate if you wanted to. You can say that, but I'm just it's not to create regimented increases. It's to create, when it's decided, these are what you have to work into to determine what that number is. That's what.
Charlene?
Yeah, what Jason is saying is basically adopting section 4.4 states the city manager shall receive such compensation for services as the city council shall determine, but such compensation shall be within the limits of available appropriations. So I do think, it is just, it's just setting a parameter. Not that necessarily, the city council is going to vote, for a salary increase that is in excess of what the city's income is. But I do agree with Jason that it is always good to have some parameters there.
Great. Yeah, at least what I'm hearing from this conversation, from Jason's point, is you're trying to set a parameter to anticipate or avoid any potential loopholes that the wrong person in 30, 50 years from now might say, well, there's nothing written here, therefore I'm going to make my salary, whatever, 50,000, 60,000, whatever that is. You're not setting any price points. You're not saying let's increase. You're saying let's set some sort of parameters, so if anyone ever wants to abuse a loophole because there's no language that stops them from it, let us set it.
That's it exactly.
Okay, great.
Just to add to that, the city manager is hired by the city council. There are parameters of where the salary should start, a range on where it should end. So if the range starts at 175 and we can afford to go to, say, 190, we could do that. And then as increases would be built in if it was 1% a year, 2% a year, or 3% a year. That all would be set by the city council. There would be a special committee that would negotiate that contract with the city manager. And once that contract was negotiated, it would have to go to the full city council, and the full city council would vote it up or down or feel they want to make changes, which they would be allowed to do.
Great. I see Councilor Brown.
Thank you. Jason, I understand what you're trying to say. I'm just trying to make it a little clearer. One of the things we do, which haven't been mentioned, is that every year we have an evaluation, an expectation for the city manager, and we have a group of folks to go over the evaluation list. And in that evaluation, we also have a perk in there that if you meet or exceed, you get certain amount. It's similar to we as city councilors and school committee members. If we go out, we do a job that you like, or for the majority of the constituents, whether it's district or citywide, then you re-elect us. We try to take a lot of the politics, day-to-day politics, out of the city of Chelsea because of its past history. Other cities that have cities in mayors, if you look at some of their raises, they put the mayor's raise in there and the city council raise in there, and they get these huge amount of raises because both of those groups benefit. We as city council, we realize we're the smallest city in the Commonwealth, and that, what we do is really a job of service, and we're not going to get rich on it. And if you try to get rich on it, you're probably going to end up with some of those elected officials in the past. So I don't think anyone wants that. I think because we have a good group of folks around our cities that pretty much checks and balances, I think it's been working out. But I understand what you're saying. If we need to clarify it and make it a little clearer, we get to do it every 10 years. It's something we should take under consideration. But I want you to understand also, and I'm sure you do, that the city council works so vigorously and hard to try to keep that image out of what we came into in 1994, when it went from receivership to elected body members. And that's why we don't give ourselves raises every year. That's why we don't talk about raises every year. For most of us, we all work full-time jobs. Some of us are retired and pensions like Councilor Robinson. But we do it for the love of serving our city and our community. I'll step, Madam Chair.
Great. Thank you, Councilor Brown. Anyone else? Oh, Alex.
What is the current salary for a member of school committee?
7,500.
7,500? Monthly stipend, or is it like salary?
Salary.
Salary?
Yeah, but they get a weekly.
Okay.
Yeah. So did everyone hear that?
And just for the record,
So
I think
it
you
was-
should tell them what the city council is too, Madam Chair.
Yeah, so it was 7,500 salary for school committee members for the year. They get paid weekly. Any more questions, comments of anyone? Going once?
I think Councilor Brown was asking for you to also share the equivalency for city council.
Oh, I missed that. Sorry, Councilor Brown. So for city council, our salary is $14,000 a year, and we also get paid weekly. Anyone else? Any questions, comments? Anyone else? Going once? Going twice? Okay, so for next meeting, we will be reviewing section 4. I will present an agenda to everyone. If anyone has any comments, send them my way. Charlene, the floor is yours.
I'm sorry. I
can't
made a
hear
note to
you.
myself. Going forward, could we get agenda the day before the meeting? We've been getting it the day of, and it would be helpful if possible to get it the day before. Thank you.
Perfect. Yes. Okay, so I will make a note to get the agenda to you the day before. Would it be helpful if you received everyone's comments the day before? That would be helpful for everyone the day before, so you can get a day to review it. Okay, So on the record, Councilor Brown, I'll let you take the floor.
I appreciate that, Charlene. It's my hope that we can get it a little earlier. I actually, again, some of us work, and I think the majority of us work. And when I get home, I look at it, and I look at it the day before. If I had another 24 hours or another 12 hours, we can really get in depth about this and have a more thorough conversation. So if it's any way possible, we could get it 2 days, or it can go up.
Monday. Mhm.
Yeah, it'd be very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, so do you guys want a day before or 2 days before? Thumbs up if you want 2 days before. 2 days before? Okay, so then what we're gonna do is, if we change it to 2 days before, it means you're gonna get the agenda and you're gonna get everyone's comments by Monday, which means you have to submit everything by Friday, the previous
Yep.
Friday.
Yep.
Okay, so if everyone can submit, and I'll send this in writing so everyone can know, send your comments by Friday at noon, and then I will make sure to have an agenda and everyone's comments by Monday. And I'll send them email, we'll send an email about this, so everyone can have it on the record in their email, so you can know the change of rules. So going forward, comments should be submitted by Friday, and you will have everything in front of you by Monday. Great. So with that being said, everyone have a great evening. This meeting has been adjourned. We'll discuss section 4 in our next meeting.
Thank you. Good night, folks.
Thank you, everybody.